My name is Rachel Matthews, and I'm 38 years old. On paper, my life is everything anyone could ever want: a steady career in logistics management, a lovely house in a quiet neighborhood where kids race their bikes up and down the block until the streetlights flicker on, and a fiance, Matthew, who, on the surface, seems to be the perfect partner. We've been together for 7 years, and our relationship, at least to the outside world, is flawless. Matthew is 36. He's a real estate agent with an easy smile, an effortless charm, and the kind of personality that makes people feel instantly at ease. He's the type of man who remembers everyone's birthdays, talks to waiters like they're old friends, and can get free dessert from a restaurant without breaking a sweat. To the world, he's the kind of guy you'd want on your team, the one you'd take home to meet your parents. I've always believed that we had it all. We've built a life that most people would envy: 2 cars in the driveway, a comfortable retirement account, and plans for a future where we'd eventually start a family. But lately, things have started to feel off. It's subtle at first, easy to ignore. A late night phone call here, a missed dinner there. It's nothing drastic, just little moments that seem to slip under the radar. And then, one evening, it changes. It was a Thursday when I first noticed the text. "Rachel, don't come home tonight. I need some space. Stay at a hotel. We'll talk later." I stared at the message for a while, feeling my pulse quicken. It was a simple text, but it didn't sit right. Space? From me? I had no idea what was happening. Was this some kind of joke? Was it a fight that had escalated? I tried to call him, but the phone rang and rang. Finally, I decided to give him the space he asked for and checked into a small motel nearby. The room smelled faintly of mildew, and the TV remote didn't work, but I didn't care. I spent the night in silence, the sound of the air conditioner buzzing above me. The next morning, Matthew still hadn't called. I tried to stay distracted, working on a project at the office, but my mind kept drifting back to that text. I had to know what was going on. 3 days later, he sent another text. "We need to talk. Come home at 6 o'clock. I stood outside the house at 5:55, nerves crawling under my skin. This was it. Whatever it was that had been happening over the past few weeks, I was about to find out. When I walked through the front door at 6:09 sharp, Matthew was sitting at the kitchen table. Beside him was a man in a cheap suit and a woman I didn't recognize. It took me a moment to realize who she was: his ex-girlfriend, Lisa. Matthew barely looked up from the table as I entered, his face unreadable. "This is Dennis, my lawyer," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Dennis slid a thick folder toward me across the table. My stomach dropped. "Rachel," Matthew said, his tone cold and emotionless, "we're getting a divorce." I felt the room spin as the words hit me, but I held my ground. I couldn't let him see how much this was shaking me. Not yet. The air around us was thick with tension, and everything I had thought I knew about my life was unraveling in front of me. Dennis went on to explain the details: how Matthew had already consulted with a lawyer, how they wanted to divide the assets, the house, the car, everything. The dog, too. Brutus, our German shepherd. All of it was up for negotiation. "Your lawyer will get the paperwork," Dennis continued. "We're hoping to make this easy." I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest. Easy? This wasn't easy. This was betrayal, plain and simple. I looked at Matthew, waiting for some sign of remorse, but there was nothing. He was distant, calm, as if he had already made peace with what was happening. After a long pause, I finally spoke. My voice barely above a whisper, I asked, "You're seriously just going to take everything?" Matthew met my gaze, his face impassive. "I think it's fair." I could feel my anger bubbling up, but I swallowed it down. I couldn't let him see the depth of my hurt. Instead, I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor, and said, "Fine, you can have it." The silence in the room was suffocating. I could hear the faint sound of the clock ticking, but all I could think about was how easily he was willing to walk away from everything we'd built. I glanced at Dennis, who had his pen poised above the paperwork, ready to continue. "But," I added, my voice gaining strength, "I'm not going to fight you for it. You want it, you take it. But don't think for a second that this is over." I left the room without another word, heading straight for the door. As I stepped outside, the weight of it all hit me. I wasn't just losing a marriage, I was losing everything I had trusted. My heart sank as I realized that I had been living in a lie, and I wasn't ready for it to end this way. But then, as I walked to my car, I felt something else creeping in: anger. I was angry, but not at the way Matthew had betrayed me. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I had been so wrapped up in our life, in the idea of us, that I ignored the red flags. But now it was time to stop pretending. I was done. This wasn't just about the divorce, it was about taking back control. Part 2. The ambush. The drive to my friend Tommy's place was a blur. The air felt thick, the weight of everything still pressing down on me. I didn't even bother calling Matthew, not after what had just happened. I didn't want to hear his voice, his excuses. When I pulled up to Tommy's house, I sat in my car for a few moments, gathering my thoughts. Tommy had been my best friend since college, the one person who always seemed to have my back. I needed to talk to him. I needed to make sense of all this. I knocked on the door, and Tommy opened it almost immediately, his face morphing from concern to shock when he saw me standing there. "Rach, what the hell happened?" He pulled me inside, motioning to the couch. I sank into the cushions, trying to steady myself. "He's gone," I muttered. "Matthew's gone. We're getting a divorce." Tommy didn't say anything for a moment, just sat beside me, his face tight with concern. "You serious? What happened? I mean, I know things were weird lately, but this?" He gestured vaguely, clearly confused. I took a deep breath and told him everything. Matthew's late-night work excuses, his password-protected phone, the sudden distance between us. I told him about the lawyer, the way Matthew had brought him into our home without so much as a warning. He sat there, Tommy, with Lisa and that lawyer, just like it was nothing. And now everything is his. He wants the house, the car, even Brutus. I said the last part with more bitterness than I intended, but I didn't care. Brutus was mine. He was the one thing I could count on. Tommy let out a low whistle. "That's cold. I knew he wasn't perfect, but this? It's like he's got no soul." "Yeah," I whispered. "I don't even recognize him anymore. It's like he's been a stranger to me for months." Tommy sat back, rubbing his hand through his hair. "So, what now? Are you really just going to give him everything? I mean, I know you're pissed, but—" I interrupted him before he could finish. "I'm not just giving him everything, Tommy. I'm not that stupid." Tommy paused, his brows furrowed, and he leaned forward. "What do you mean? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to take back control," I said, my voice steady now, the resolve sinking in. "I'm not letting him walk away with everything he thinks is his. I've been too trusting for too long. I need to protect myself." Tommy's eyes widened. "Wait, you've been planning something, haven't you?" I nodded slowly. 6 months ago, when things started to feel off, I didn't just sit around waiting for him to mess everything up. I started making moves. Tommy blinked, clearly impressed. "What kind of moves?" "I called my mom," I said, my voice gaining strength. "She's sharp as a tack, and I knew if anyone could help me figure out how to protect my assets, it would be her. So we met with an estate lawyer, her lawyer. We came up with a plan." Tommy leaned in, his voice dropping lower. "Are you saying you did something with your house? Your car?" I nodded again. "Exactly. I sold the house to my mom. Fair market value, all legal. Then I leased it back from her for $1 a month. The car, too. Everything was documented. No way this will look suspicious. And all of it is in my name now. His name is nowhere on any of it." Tommy's jaw dropped. "Holy shit, you actually did that?" I let out a breath, leaning back against the couch. I wasn't just going to sit back and let him take everything. If he thought he could pull this on me, then he'd have to deal with me doing the same thing, only smarter. Tommy laughed in disbelief. "Rach, that's genius. Seriously, you're playing chess while he's stuck on checkers." I smiled slightly, but there was no humor in my eyes. "I'm not done yet, though. Not by a long shot, but this is just the beginning." The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I hired Rita, a no-nonsense lawyer I'd worked with before for business contracts. She was tough, efficient, and more importantly, she didn't let anyone push her around. When I explained everything to her, she smiled faintly, the first bit of reassurance I'd gotten since Matthew had dropped his bombshell. "You did the right thing," Rita said. "He's not going to get away with this." I let out a long breath, the tension finally starting to lift. But then Rita added, "He might fight you. He's going to be mad. And he might try to claim that you're hiding assets, that it's fraud. But we'll show him it's all legal. We'll be ready." The first official response came from Matthew's lawyer, Dennis, just 3 days after that horrible conversation at the kitchen table. The letter was exactly what I expected, a demand for half of everything, starting with the house. The Lexus was next. And then, of course, spousal support. The total amount requested was outrageous, $3,000 a month. Plus, he wanted me to pay for all her legal fees. I let out a bitter laugh as I read through the letter. He wanted me to give him everything, the house, the car, my hard-earned money. But there was one problem. None of it was actually mine anymore. I immediately called Rita, feeling a strange sense of calm. "I need you to respond," I said, my voice steady, "and I need it to be bulletproof." Her response was as sharp as ever. "Already ahead of you. Let's make sure he learns his lesson." The next morning, I sat down with Tommy again, a cup of coffee in hand, feeling like I was ready to take on the world. "You're not going to believe this," I said, holding up the response from Rita's office. "Matthew's lawyer is about to get a big surprise." Tommy leaned in, grinning. "Let's hear it." Rita basically laughed in their faces. She told them that everything Matthew thinks he owns isn't his at all. The house? It's my mom's. The Lexus? Same deal. She's not going to give him a single thing. And as for spousal support, we're offering a token amount, $500 for a year max. Tommy burst out laughing. "Oh man, this is going to be good." I sat back, a small smile tugging at my lips. It's going to be better than good. It's going to be epic. For now, I was taking control. I was done being the victim in this mess. If Matthew thought he could have it all, he was sorely mistaken. And if he thought he could manipulate me into backing down, he was in for a rude awakening. This fight was far from over, but I was prepared. Part 3. The turnaround. A week passed, and with every passing day, the reality of what was happening sank deeper into me. At first, I was rattled, caught off guard by how quickly everything had spiraled. But now I felt something shift inside of me. It was more than just anger. It was determination. I wasn't going to let Matthew, or anyone, dictate how my future would unfold. The next step in this journey was to make sure I had every legal angle covered. My lawyer, Rita, had already begun drafting the response to Dennis's request for the house and car. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that if I didn't act fast, I might lose everything, again. So I made a call. 6 months earlier, when I first started suspecting something was off with Matthew, I didn't sit idly by. No, I had already begun laying the groundwork to protect myself, long before he'd dropped the bombshell of a divorce on me. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I knew my marriage had been teetering on the edge for some time. I needed to prepare, to secure my future in case things went south. And sure enough, they had. I called my mom, who, at 73, was sharp as a tack. I trusted her with everything. I told her what had been happening, explained how Matthew was acting, and how things seemed to be falling apart. I needed a solution, something legal that would keep me from losing everything. We met with her estate lawyer, Howard, who had handled all of my mother's financials for years. He'd been the one to help her protect her assets, and now I needed his expertise. "You think he's cheating?" my mom had asked during our meeting. "I don't know, but something's off," I'd told her. "I can't ignore it anymore." Howard thought for a moment, looking over my situation. "Here's an idea," he said, tapping his pen on the desk. "Your mother can purchase the assets from you. We'll do it at fair market value, completely legal. Then we'll lease them back to you for a nominal fee. That way you're not technically transferring ownership to anyone else, and the assets remain protected." I nodded, already feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. "And this would hold up in court?" Howard smiled. "Absolutely, as long as everything is documented and done properly." The transaction was swift. The house sold to my mom for the exact amount I had paid for it 3 years ago. My mom wired me the money from her retirement accounts, money that had been sitting there for years, untouched. Immediately after, I moved the money into a separate account Matthew had no access to. I knew this was the smart move. The Lexus, which Matthew had always adored, was also sold to my mom. She leased it back to him with a verbal agreement, no paperwork. But the house? The house was mine. The car? Mine too. When I met with Rita to explain what I had done, she looked over the documents, impressed. "You didn't just think ahead. You covered every angle," she said, scanning the contracts with a critical eye. "This is airtight, Rachel. If Matthew thinks he's going to get his hands on any of it, he's sorely mistaken." For the next few weeks, the pressure of the situation mounted. Every time I saw Matthew, every time I spoke to Dennis, they tried to break me down. Matthew was insistent. He demanded the house, the car, the dog, the assets he thought were rightfully his. He didn't know about the paperwork, about the transfers to my mom. He didn't know I had been making moves behind the scenes. His lawyer, Dennis, tried to leverage the idea that I had been hiding assets. The timing was suspicious, they claimed, but Rita, sharp and calculating, was ready for him. "If he thinks you knew this was coming 6 months ago," Rita had said one morning as we sat in her office, Then let's give him something to think about. We'll present the facts as they are. All the assets were transferred legally to your mother for fair market value. Nothing was hidden. Nothing is fraud. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. This wasn't just about surviving a divorce anymore. It was about outsmarting the person who had once been my partner, my confidant, and now my adversary. The first official response came 2 days later. Dennis sent me a letter, a standard divorce petition, outlining his demands. The house, the Lexus, and a claim for $3,000 in spousal support. But when I opened the envelope and saw his list of assets, a smug smile crept onto my face. This was exactly what I had been waiting for. Rita was already on top of it. She called me the moment she saw the letter. "It's time to fire back," she said. "Let's make sure Matthew knows you're not the one he can push around." We filed our response quickly, clearly showing the evidence. The sale of the house, the car, everything. Everything was legal. Everything was above board. Rita's words were sharp, like a knife cutting through Matthew's claims. "We'll split the joint assets fairly," Rita said to Dennis, "but the house and the car, they're not his to take. The house belongs to Rachel's mother. The Lexus, same deal." When Dennis tried to argue, Rita's voice was steady, like she was discussing something trivial. "The assets were sold months ago. They're not up for discussion." It wasn't long before Matthew started calling, and calling, and calling. "I can't believe you did this," he'd shout into the phone. "You transferred the house to your mother? You think I won't fight this?" I stayed calm, too calm for his liking. "It's public record, Matthew. You could have checked any time. I didn't hide anything." Matthew's frustration was palpable. "This isn't over. You can't just get away with this." "You'll have to try harder than that," I replied. He hung up on me, but it didn't matter. I had made my move, and he was left scrambling. The real fun began the following week when Matthew's sister, Lisa, reached out to me, demanding to know why I had taken everything. She said it in a way that was meant to provoke me, but I wasn't going to let her. I calmly explained to her, "Everything was transferred legally. You can ask Matthew about it. It's not my fault if he didn't bother to do his due diligence." I could practically hear her fuming on the other end of the phone, but I wasn't going to engage with her. This wasn't about proving something to them. This was about protecting myself. The more they tried to intimidate me, the more I felt empowered. I wasn't just fighting to keep what was mine. I was fighting for my dignity, my future. I had spent so long being manipulated by Matthew, putting up with his charm and his smokescreens, that I had forgotten what it felt like to take control of my own life. And now I remembered. Part 4. The Courtroom Showdown. The days leading up to the court hearing were a whirlwind of preparation, paperwork, and nerves. Rita was meticulous, going over every detail of my case. We had all the evidence, proof of the house's transfer, the car's sale, and even the email exchanges with Matthew's lawyer. There was no way Matthew could win this. Not legally, anyway. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew that a divorce court could be unpredictable. The stakes were high, and I had to be ready for anything. When the day arrived, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the blazer I had carefully chosen for the occasion. Rita had insisted I dress the part. Professional, calm, and unflappable. I wasn't about to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. The courtroom was packed with people. Matthew was sitting on the other side of the room with Dennis, his lawyer, who kept shooting me glances like he was sizing me up. I kept my gaze forward, ignoring the tension building in my chest. This was it, the final battle. Rita had been right all along when she told me that Matthew's behavior was going to catch up with him. His actions, his arrogance, his sense of entitlement, it was all going to come to a head in front of the judge. And when the judge saw the evidence, I knew the verdict would be clear. As we waited for the proceedings to begin, I glanced over at Matthew. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, but there was something off about him. His usual charm was gone, replaced by a nervous edge. For the first time, he seemed human, vulnerable, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. Rita leaned in, speaking softly, but with confidence. "You've got this. Stick to the facts, Rachel. Don't let him manipulate you. You're in control now." The judge entered the courtroom, a tall man with a serious expression, his gray hair neatly combed. He gave us all a quick glance and gestured for us to sit down. "Let's begin," the judge said, his voice deep and calm. "Mrs. Matthews, Mr. Garrett, let's hear your positions." Dennis jumped in first, outlining Matthew's case. His argument was simple. He wanted half of everything, starting with the house, the car, and the dog. He claimed that Rachel, me, had been deceitful, hiding assets from Matthew, and that the timing of the transfer was suspicious. Your Honor, my client believes these transfers were done with the intent to defraud Mr. Garrett of what is rightfully his, Dennis said, his voice dripping with accusation. He should be entitled to half of all assets, including the house and vehicle, as well as spousal support of $3,000 a month. Rita didn't hesitate. She stood up, her presence commanding. Your Honor, we respectfully disagree. All the transfers were conducted legally and at fair market value. There was no fraud involved. Mrs. Matthews's mother purchased the property, and all the paperwork was done correctly, as required by law. If Mr. Garrett had been paying attention to his own finances, he would have known about these transactions. The judge leaned forward, examining the documents in front of him. You sold the property to your mother? He asked, addressing me directly. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice steady. The house and the car were sold to my mother 6 months ago, before any divorce filings were made. Everything was legal, all documented, and I've provided all the proof. The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. And you're claiming this was done in good faith? I met his gaze unwavering. Absolutely. The judge turned to Dennis. And Mr. Garrett was aware of these transactions, or did he simply not inquire? Dennis faltered for a moment before responding. He knew that Mrs. Matthews was conducting business with her mother, but he did not know the specifics of the transfers. The judge nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the bench. It seems to me, Mrs. Matthews, that Mr. Garrett had the opportunity to ask questions. He chose not to. Your evidence is solid, and it appears these transfers were done in accordance with the law. The tension in the room was thick as the judge reviewed the documents. I could feel Matthew's eyes on me, but I didn't look his way. He wasn't the one in control anymore. Rita's voice broke the silence. Your Honor, as for the house and the car, they were both sold at fair market value. We're not disputing that Mr. Garrett and Mrs. Matthews were married, but these assets are no longer his. They belong to Mrs. Matthews's mother. As for the dog, Brutus, we would like to request that he remain with Mrs. Matthews. He is her registered pet, and she's been his primary caregiver. Matthew's face darkened as Rita's words sank in. His grip tightened on the armrests of his chair, but he remained silent. The judge looked over the documents again before speaking. I have reviewed the evidence presented, and while Mr. Garrett may not have been fully aware of the timing of the transactions, the fact remains that they were conducted legally. The house, the car, and the dog are not part of the marital assets. As for the spousal support, Mrs. Matthews has made a generous offer of rehabilitative support, which I find fair. Matthew's lawyer tried to argue again, but the judge wasn't having it. Enough, the judge said, his voice cutting through the air. I've made my decision. The house and the vehicle are not marital assets. They were sold legally and are not up for division. Mrs. Matthews will retain ownership of both. As for spousal support, I'm awarding $500 a month for 1 year, as agreed. The joint account will be split evenly. And as for Brutus, he'll stay with Mrs. Matthews. Case closed. The weight lifted off my shoulders like a sudden release of tension. It was over. The judge had ruled in my favor, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe again. Matthew sat there, stunned, his face pale. I knew he hadn't expected this outcome. As the courtroom emptied, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, not over Matthew, but over myself. I had done what I needed to do. I had protected what was mine, and more importantly, I had taken control of my life again. Rita gave me a small smile as we left the courtroom. You did great, Rachel. This is your win. I smiled back, feeling something inside me shift for the better. It wasn't just about the house, the car, or even the money. It was about taking back my peace of mind. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Part 5. The Aftermath and Reconciliation. The days following the court hearing felt almost surreal. I had spent months, no, years, worrying about how things might unfold. What would happen if Matthew decided to play dirty? What would I do if he turned this into a messy battle? But none of that came to pass. Instead, the court had sided with me, calm, collected, and prepared, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of relief. The victory wasn't just in the documents, the legal transactions, or even the house. It was in the quiet confidence I now carried with me. No more wondering what Matthew was up to. No more questioning myself or my decisions. I spent the next few days catching up with my life. The phone calls and messages that had once seemed urgent now felt distant, almost irrelevant. Matthew's calls were ignored, as were the messages from his lawyer. His attempts to get in touch were now hollow, like echoes of a life that no longer mattered. But the fallout was far from over. I still had to deal with the drama that followed, the ripple effects of the decisions I had made. 2 days after the ruling, Matthew tried to regain some sense of control by showing up at my house. The house, my house, which was no longer his in any way. I'd changed the locks immediately after the court hearing, not out of paranoia, but as a precaution. I wasn't taking any chances with someone who thought they could waltz back in just because we had shared a life at one point. I heard the knock at the door and knew exactly who it was. I took my time walking to the door, making sure I looked calm, unbothered. When I opened it, there he was, standing there, looking the same as he always did, with his perfect smile, trying to maintain that facade of charm. "Rachel, we need to talk," Matthew said, his voice unusually soft, almost pleading. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "About what, Matthew? We already talked in court. I think everything was made clear." He looked past me into the house, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't over. You can't just take everything from me and get away with it." I felt a flicker of something. Anger, maybe, but also a deep sense of resignation. "No, Matthew, you can't just take everything. You didn't get away with anything, but you sure as hell tried. And now it's done." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not here to listen to any more of your excuses. You've had your chance, and you blew it. You chose to manipulate me, and now you're the one left with nothing." The words stung him more than I anticipated. His eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there too. A flicker of regret, of guilt maybe. "I never wanted it to end this way," he said quietly, almost as if talking to himself. "But I thought I could control things." "You never cared about how things would end, Matthew," I shot back, my voice hardening. "You never cared about me. You cared about your control, your assets, your image, and now look where we are." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, but I quickly shook the feeling off. I wasn't the one who had messed this up. I wasn't the one who had broken the trust, the loyalty, the foundation of our relationship. "I'm done," I said, closing the door firmly in his face. In the following weeks, the drama didn't stop with Matthew. His sister Lisa decided to take matters into her own hands, sending me a long, angry message accusing me of destroying the family and taking advantage of Matthew's kindness. I wasn't surprised by her reaction. She had always been the one to defend him, no matter what he did. But her message was more than just words. It was an attempt to discredit me, to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. It was the last-ditch effort of someone who had always been on the wrong side of things. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a single, simple message on Facebook, the platform where she had aired her grievances. It was just a statement of the truth. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. I didn't steal anything. I protected what was mine, and that's it. The silence that followed was deafening. I knew people were talking, but I didn't care. What mattered was that I had taken control of my life again. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. The weeks continued, and slowly the dust began to settle. I started focusing on myself, on my work, my health, my happiness, and little by little, I began to feel lighter. Matthew's absence didn't leave a hole in my heart like I had expected. Instead, it left room for something new, peace. I was sitting on my porch one afternoon, a cup of tea in hand, when I received a call from my mom. "Hey, honey, I just wanted to check in. How's everything going?" she asked, her voice warm and loving. I smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude for her. "It's good, Mom. Better than good. Actually, I think I'm finally at peace with everything. I don't feel angry anymore, just free." "That's my girl," she said with a soft laugh. "You did the right thing. You always have a way of taking care of yourself, even when things get tough." "I learned it from you," I replied, my heart full. "I know you did," she said, the pride in her voice clear. "And don't forget, I've got your back, always." The phone call ended, and I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Matthew had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, it wasn't about the house, the car, or even the money. It was about my peace. It was about standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and making sure I never let someone else take control of my life again. As for Matthew, well, I'd heard through mutual friends that he was trying to move on. I didn't care enough to know the details. I didn't need to. What mattered was that I was finally free. And just when I thought the past was behind me, I received one final message, an unexpected postcard, postmarked from 2 states away. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was from Vanessa, Matthew's ex-girlfriend. The message was short, but it spoke volumes. You won. Hope you're happy. I smiled, folding the postcard in my hands. I wasn't happy because I had won. I was happy because I had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking away from the chaos and finding your own peace.